Hey guys, today we're going to do law of cosines. So there's only two problems that I'm going to show you. and, they're kind of long though. So I'll take you through two different types that we're going to be seeing in class and the types that we're going to be working with. So these are your formulas. Now the formulas, I know there's three of them. It's really the same formula. The only difference is whatever side you're going to use the angle that's across from it. So capital A is across from little a, capital B is across from little b. So that's the main thing you need to remember. So you really don't need to memorize all of these, just really one of them. So in this case, C is what's missing, and across from C is capital C. So we're going to be using the cosine of 20 in this one. So we'll use this formula, but it's really the same formula for everything. So these are going to be your triangles. It says solve. So when you see the word solve, that's not just solve for C. Solve means find C, find A, find B. So we need to find everything that is missing for those ones. Okay, now with this, the law of sines wouldn't work because you would do sine of 20 over something that's missing, and then you'd have another unknown. So you can't have two unknowns and solve. So the law of sines will not work with this. The way it's going to work is using the law of cosines. So I'm going to have c squared. Okay, and then you got the other two sides. So that's what this a and this b are. It's the other two sides. So I've got 5 squared and 11 squared minus 2, and then you're just going to use the same exact two sides and multiply them again. And then you just got the cosine of 20. So this is how it's going to look. These ones are a lot nicer because you just plug them straight in the calculator. Just make sure you are in the right mode, click mode, make sure degree is highlighted. If it's not, scroll down and click it. Then I can just type these all straight in there. So I've got 5 squared plus 11 squared minus 2 times 5 times 11 times the cosine of 20. So you type everything in, you get this big old decimal right here, which is fine to write down, but we're not completely done with that. So if you're going to round in any way, make sure you give me at least 3 or 4 decimals. So 42.6338. And that is c squared. So we're still not quite done yet because you have to get rid of that squared. So to get rid of the squared part, you're going to have to do the square root of it. So keep those numbers in your calculator, because if you keep it in your calculator, and then you can just do the square root of, and you can either just go up there and click on it and it will type in all the decimals for you. So you don't have to worry about any rounding errors if you do it this way. Okay, so in this case, now you're finally down to your C. You can round to the nearest tenth. So I got 6.5. It's not completely done yet because I need to finish solving. So when I finish solving for these other two, yes, you can just go ahead and use the law of cosines and figure those out as well. But you do not have to do it. It's a lot more difficult to use the law of cosines. So, for example, for angle B, I can use the law of sines. So now I've got sine of B over 5, and I've also got the sine of C, which is 20, over that C value I've got. So that's the 6.5. I'm going to put a couple more decimals in there. 295. Okay, so if you're doing calculations, give me at least 3 or 4 decimals so that you can have an accurate answer. Now, notice I picked angle B. I did not pick angle A because you cannot find an obtuse angle using the law of sines. It will give you the wrong answer, and you may not even know it. The reason why I knew not to go for A, not just because of the way it looks, because when you get your quiz or test, you're just going to get a sentence like this, and that is it. So you're going to have to make your own triangle. The reason why I know A may be obtuse is because it's across from the biggest side. So if it's across from 11 instead of the 5 or the 6.5, I don't want to use the law of sines for that. So I have to use it for B. Now I can just cross multiply. So I've got 5 times the sine of 20. And then I'm going to cross multiply here, and I'll get we'll get that 6-point number times the sine of B. So I just need to divide it by the sine of B. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to divide it by that 6.5 number, and I'm going to get this weird decimal. So I've got 0.2619. and that is the sine of B. And if you remember, when we're looking for an angle, you have to do the inverse. So I'm going to do the inverse sine of that decimal right there, and that is going to give me angle B. So that's going to be about 15.2 degrees. Okay, now you can do the law of cosines to figure out A, but that's not necessary. Three angles in a triangle add up to 180. So if I just do 180 minus that 15.2 minus the 20, that's going to give me my remaining angle. So you can just do 180 minus those. And that's going to give me my 144.8. That will not work with the law of sines if you try it. And that's how these problems are going to look. This is how they're going to be on your quiz or test that we're going to be taking. So you got to make sure you're able to solve for all of it. So that was the easier one for the law of cosines. The only reason this one is more difficult is when you actually do the law of cosines, you have to do some calculations as opposed to just plug in the calculator. So in this case, if I'm going to do the law of cosines, I'm going to want to find the obtuse one because I know I can't use the law of sines to figure it out. So you could really pick any one to start with, but I'm going to use the A because I know that's going to be the biggest angle, which means the 9 squared goes alone. The 7 and the 5 are on the other side. And then I've got cosine of A, which I don't know. So that's why I'm just going to use the letter A. So you can start your calculations here. This gives me 81. 7 squared and 5 squared is 74. And then right here, I've got to multiply. This is all multiplication. So 5 times 7 is 35, times 2 is 70. Okay, next, I want to start getting A alone. This is multiplication right here. This is the biggest part I see people messing up. That is multiplication. You cannot subtract these. So you got to start getting A alone. So I'm going to do this, and that's going to give me 7. And now I can finally get rid of that negative 70. So I'm going to divide. Since they multiplied, I'm going to divide. And that's going to give me negative 0.1. So again, if you're looking for the angle, you got to do the inverse cosine of that to get that. So when I put that in the calculator, inverse cosine of negative 0.1 is going to give me 95.7 for angle A. Okay, so this one's a little more difficult because you got to go through all these calculations. Once you have that, though, you can use the law of sines to find either one, because if this one's obtuse, these two have to be acute. So now we can go and use law of sines. So I'm going to do the sine of A, which was this 95.7 something, 7392. And I'm going to put that over 9, and then it doesn't matter which one I do. So sine of C over 5. And then you can cross multiply. So I'm going to do 5 times the sine of that 95 number. And then sine of C times 9 is just 9 sine of C. So I have to divide that by 9. And that's going to give me this weird decimal, so 0.5528. And then your last thing is I need to get C alone, so I got to do the inverse cosine of that. Whoops, wrong button. So inverse cosine of that will give me about 33.6 degrees. Okay, once you have two angles, all you need to do to get the third one is subtract from 180. So that part's easy peasy once you get there, once you get two angles. So minus the 95.7, minus the 33.6, and that's going to give you your final angle. So I'm going to minus the 95, minus the 33, and that's going to leave me with about 50.7 degrees for angle B. Okay, so when you are working these out, you can use both law of sines and cosines. Just remember that the law of sines can only find acute angles. Okay, good luck.